Hi everyone, this is Dave from Mountbatten Estates. As part of our interview series, I've got a really good friend of mine, a chap called Jon McDermott from TPX Planning. I've known Jon for a good few years, and to be fair, I do call him like a walking encyclopedia when it comes to everything there is to know about planning. So I'm actually really excited about this one. We are really going to have a deep dive into the whole planning, what's going on, what do we need to be looking at, hopefully try and raise everyone's knowledge when it comes to the importance of planning and using the right consultant. So Jon, I think I've talked you up a little bit there. Please introduce yourself, where you're from, and we can get dived into this thing.
Okay, hi guys, I'm Jon McDermott. I'm a chartered town planner. I enter my 20th year of being a planning professional this year, which makes me feel old.
You don't look it, Jon.
I work for Town Planning Expert. It's my company. I'm a co-director in that company. It's a group of companies that deals with planning consultancy, planning education, and at some point in time development, but we'll get there eventually. But that is TPX.
Jon, that's a bit modest, a little bit of development. I know you know the main business is planning led, but you are doing some impressive things with some listed and monumental buildings, shall we say? Can you give a little flavor of like a couple of the schemes you're working on, because it will definitely impress people.
Okay, so I am modest about developments because it hasn't gone the way we want to, and I'm actually brutally honest about it. So like all budding developers, COVID took a big hit. The two schemes that we currently have on the table are Raglan Gatehouse, which we're seeking to dispose of with the planning permission, and the Defensible Barracks in Pembroke Dock, which is a monstrous 47,000 square foot castle, let's use that term, that we were able to purchase massively undervalued. We're seeking to simply flip. That is the nature of development, effectively, and you have to roll with the punches. One of my key teachings when I'm talking to property people is learn when to pull the parachute, and I absolutely learned from my own advice.
Good stuff. So Jon, when would someone need a planning consultant, and how, what things do they need to be mindful when choosing one?
Oh, that's a good starter for 10. Right. So I'm going to go 2 lines here, if I may. You shouldn't need a planning consultant for the easy stuff. Right. Put simply, you should not need a planning consultant for the easy stuff. Building an extension, building a fence, building a wall. You shouldn't need to employ the services of a planning consultant, or people many feel the comfort of doing so. You need planning consultants when things get difficult. So when things get technically challenging, when matters of law kick in. A planning consultant is essentially, Dave likes to think of me of a walking encyclopedia. We're the solicitors of the planning world. That's our job. We're there to help developers get development on technically challenging sites, and that's where I spend most of my working life nowadays, is dealing with sites with a torrid history. If I'm brutally honest, you get involved with them at the right stage. So again, a basic application, you shouldn't need to speak to a planning consultant unless things are going wrong. A more complicated application, you should get them in first. In my professional view, and that's not just my view, that's also the view of many consultants up there in the country, and of course the chartered body, the Royal Town Planning Institute.
All right, okay. So Jon, tell us, I'm going to ruffle a few feathers here with this one. So I'm a firm believer that you need to try and keep architecture and planning completely separate. Just purely from my own opinion, no one else is here, but I've seen a lot of refused planning applications, and sometimes it's refused for some minor stuff that if they had used a planning consultant, it would have been able to deal with that issue. What's your thoughts and suggestions on this?
Okay, I'm probably going to ruffle some feathers as well with my answer. I'm going to quote one of my favourite quotes.
Yeah.
Is actually from Star Trek, believe it or not, because all planning consultants are nerds. So
Yeah.
all my fellow planners will recognise this. This is from Scotty, and Scotty says, "Damn it, man! How many times have I told you the right tool for the right job?" Right, simple.
Yeah, I totally agree
Architects
with
and
that.
planners, we're tools,
Yeah.
effectively. Let's use that term. We're tools.
That could be quite
And
apt, actually.
you
I've
need
known
the
a few.
right tool. Yeah, you need the right tool for the right job. So you need to involve the right professional team in reality
Yeah.
at the right time. And planners are good at what we do, great at reading policy, great at understanding the nuances, the discussionary process. We're
Yeah.
rubbish at designing buildings. Architects are fantastic at designing buildings. They can design you skyscrapers and things with laser beams coming out of them. Wonderful. Yeah. That's where their strength is.
Yeah, 100%.
And so whilst architects do planning work, planners very seldomly do architectural work. And what we like to think of ourselves as essentially we should be complementing skill sets. The planner should be there to provide the interpretation of what's going on for the architect and vice versa.
Yeah.
That's how you should use as two disciplines together if you're going to use a planning consultant and an architect.
Yeah.
That's how it should work.
In theory. John, there is so many changes going on within the whole planning world right now when it comes to there is so many changes going on in terms of PD for airspace, the whole changes to the use class order. We've got Class E, which has just come out. We've got Class AA, Class AB, we've got Class ZA, which is demolishing buildings. Look, there is a plethora to choose from. Where do we need to start looking, and what do you think, in your opinion, is the best opportunities out there?
Okay, so where do you need to start looking? That comes down to the individual developer's experience, in my view.
Yeah.
A brand spanking new developer, straight off the street, never touched property data or information before, is unlikely to be able to go and get backing or funding for a multi-million-pound commercial conversion. They need to start a hell of a lot smaller.
Yeah.
I call this essentially our principles of education: GCSE, A-level, undergraduate degree, postgraduate degree, doctorate.
Yeah.
You can't do a doctorate straight away.
Yeah.
Simple logic. So it really comes down to the person. Now, in terms of what anyone should look for right now, where I think the key easy wins are going to occur, the answer is that's going to occur in our high streets. We've gone through a market change. It's not an adjustment. It's a fundamental market shift over the course of the last 2 years. We've seen our high streets die. We've seen our major retailers retreat from those high streets. We've seen some major retailers get wiped off the face of the map. Everyone, I think, has got a vacant Debenhams inside their town right now. That's where the big opportunity, I think, is going to come in 2022 and onwards. And that coincides with the government's focus to regenerate our towns. They announced 20 authorities are going to get funding through the Levelling Up Fund, with Sheffield and Wolverhampton being the first to benefit from a large pot of cash.
Wow.
Right? That is going to be where the big game change occurs, I think, in 2022.
Fantastic. Good, solid advice there. Now, I've read, and there's a fair bit of speculation, isn't there, in terms of some of these new PDU allowances. They might be taken away. I think the jury's still out. What's your opinion on this, John?
Simply that they'll only get taken away if we, as the public, demonstrate we cannot be trusted with them. Now, think of it like a parent and a child's favorite toy. If a child smashes that toy into pieces, and the government is given no choice but to react, it must react.
Yeah.
Right? And it reacts in one or two ways. It either changes the permitted development allowance, like we saw last year, with some of our favourite toys getting altered by the addition of the national standards. No longer will we able to get sub 37 square metre dwellings into the system, right? Or they're removed in entirety in favour of something a bit stricter. Once PD rights are established, it's rare that they eradicate completely. They're morphed into something else. And that normally comes with a packet of other changes. However, it is common for the government in question to impose additional controls on top of the PD allowance to prevent us out here in the real world from spoiling the game, right? But you can't play Monopoly if you've scribbled all over the Monopoly board and changed the names of the roads. So reality is, it's down to us as property developers, property investors, property professionals, whatever you want to call yourself, to use our great power with great responsibility and not cock it up. Simple.
Indeed. John, why should developers look at a property's history to be able to try and maybe identify what you kind of can't do with it going forward?
Great question. I have, as a planning practitioner, what I call my 3 rules of navigation. It's the same as the 3 rules of navigation at sea. Where you've been, where you are, and where you're going to. The first starting point is always where you've been. What's happened to that property's life in the course of its life in order to get it where it is. Now, that may reveal some hidden home truths about that property. If you're looking at a property for the first time and the previous owners have submitted 8 or 9 or 10, and I've seen like 20 or 30 applications for broadly the same thing, all getting the same answer because there was this weird expectation that if they ask enough, the planning authority will just give up. Yeah. Right? That doesn't happen, by the way. They just dig in harder. But that kind of history says something drastic was wrong with the proposition. Change the proposition, change the script. We call it re-establishing the connection with the planning authority. So where you've had that history of no, you need to show as a developer that you are different from the people who have previously put the planning authority through all that work. And that's why knowing that history is critical. The other thing is, it might reveal something in the history that you really want, that you really want to see. Planners love you to copy. We absolutely adore it when you copy because it makes our lives easier, right? And if you copy what's gone on, then we can turn around and say, oh, we've done this before. It's fine. We'll approve it again. Quite happy with that. Yeah. Now, granted, there's some going off period inside of that. There's some periods where there might be a material change of circumstance, a change in policy, nationally or locally. Think national standards as an example. Yeah. But broadly, planners love to be consistent, or love to try and be consistent with previous decisions that they've already made. And so the history might reveal something that you hadn't previously considered that might be worthwhile to explore. And that's why history is important. Where the property has been, who's touched it before you, what's happened. The development we've done at Raglan Gatehouse, the 8 units that we have planning permission and list of building consent for, I would not have had the confidence to do that, right? If I had not seen on the planning history that there had been previous approvals for the alternative use of the main building, and there had been a previous approval for building a new building on the road itself, on the other piece of land that's attached to the plot. I simply wouldn't have had the confidence as a planner to go back to Plymouth and say, you've done this before, boys and girls, shall we do this again? If those things hadn't appeared when I did a deep dive into the history.
Brilliant, brilliant. 'cause I know you've often referred back to old maps, haven't you, to identify what was on the land previously, and then obviously try and make a judgment on, you know, what can be done with it again. All right, okay. So in terms of, can you maybe just give everyone a quick overview of what like householder, minor, and major applications are? Because then obviously they can, you know, find out where the development sits within that.
So householder applications are what they say on the tin. They are for homeowners to access. They are typically very small extensions or alterations to a house or a flat. That's what they're there to do. They are in theory a more simple type of application to submit. They should, but given the current state of play with planning, don't take 8 weeks to complete from the planning authority's side. And you shouldn't need a planning consultant for that level of work. That's where we would sort of look at it and go, are you sure you want us to wade in? Beyond that, you're into minor. Minor is for dwellings primarily, or larger forms of development. Anything up to 9 units in size, anything up to about 1,000 square foot of commercial floor space added. It's counted as a minor. Again, typically 8 weeks, albeit the current state of planning. That figure could be a darn sight longer. And that is there for new property developers. Dave's laughing. He knows what we're going to be facing at Elmbridge. So that is there for new property developers to engage with the system for the first time. It's a full planning application, and new developers sometimes find the comfort of a planning consultant holding the hand along for the ride in the course of that.
Yeah.
And then latterly, major development, anything over 1,000 square meters, anything over 10 anything over 9 to 10 units and above. Straight into major. 13-week timescale given by government, double that or even triple that, depending on the complexity case. What I would say is focus your attention very fervently on getting proper consultancy support for a major. It's going to be a big project and you need to deal with it as such.
Brilliant, brilliant. John, with developments, primarily there's going to be Section 106 and SIL, typically. When is that due? And is there any kind of ways we can try and maybe mitigate that risk and bring it down?
When is it due? So Section 106 and SIL are due broadly at the same time.
Yeah.
So they do broadly the same thing. Either you're paying money to the council on first commencement, or you are paying money to the council on first commencement. The exception to that is where you're providing affordable housing, where you're effectively selling the affordable housing product to the affordable housing provider at the agreed rate once you've completed that product, right? Whatever it is, houses, flats, what have you. You mitigate it through a number of different ways, and they tend to be development specific. So there are general exemptions applied in the National Planning Policy Framework, but those tend to be flexed by individual councils. Reading, Elmbridge have flexed the general exemption of 9 units and below doesn't need affordable housing that's given in the NPPF by saying, look, we need affordable housing, we need to sort it out. The presumption is you need to try and come to some agreement on Section 106 because you are signing up to that Section 106 agreement. It is a mutual agreement between the parties. So there will be some negotiation there. And a good planning consultant, a good Section 106 surveyor, and there are such things out there in the world, will work very hard to negotiate down the values that are being requested inside of the 106.
Is that true a viability statement, John?
That's a viability statement, yeah. SIL is very difficult to mitigate because nominally 75% of all of the developments in that borough area have already been tested against it and deemed to be deliverable. So viability goes way out of the equation at that stage. So you then have some broad exemptions, normally the existing use exemption. You're reusing a vacant building that's been in use for 6 months out of the last 3 years. It's a charity, it's affordable housing, no SIL paid on those, or it's an extension to someone's home and you don't pay for SIL for the first 100 square meters. That kind of thing, right? But that's how you mitigate it. Now, obviously, you set planning applications up in such a way to mitigate, because the best form of defense is a good offense. So you set up your application so you're already ready to mitigate. And you and I have had discussions about how to mitigate that for one of your projects, and the options there too. The choice is always, do I pay the SIL and not have to mitigate, or do I mitigate and then not pay the SIL? And it's a case of which is the lesser of two evils.
Brilliant. All right, in terms of PreAPPs, now it's kind of a love-hate relationship people have with PreAPPs, because in one sense they think that a PreAPP is dead money. On the other hand, you know, John, you know better when it comes to when it's needed and when it's not needed. Can you just maybe give people or maybe a suggestion when people might want to really start seriously considering taking up the PreAPP service?
Okay, so I'll give 3 classic examples, right? To break the chain of incidents first. So to demonstrate that a new developer has come along and wants to work with the council to overcome that string of previous refusals, or a particularly damaging previous refusal. One that says, look, overdevelopment, forget it, not going to work with us. You use PreAPP in that instance to chain the break of incidents, to change that that whole sequence of no, because you need, at that stage, desperately need the planning officers on side.
Yeah,
that's the first one. And that's what we've done at Elmbridge, essentially, is use the PreAPP to break the chain.
That's right.
The second is on challenging sites like listed buildings or heritage assets. There, the PreAPP you want to have is with the conservation officer, the decision maker, right? And happily, that will happen. You'll have a conversation with the conservation officer. Raglan and the barracks are great examples of that. We've had discussions with both conservation officers. One has yielded planning permission of listed building consent already. The barracks, they've told us what they want to do. They were really up
Brilliant.
And told us what they wanted.
Yeah.
Right. Fabulous. Love that. That'll go into the legal pack. So reality is you can gain a lot of insight if you're speaking to the right person at council. And then finally, Greenbelt. I always use a PreAPP on Greenbelt.
Do you?
Universally, always use a PreAPP on Greenbelt. The reason for that is that I need to change I need to break the thinking, that's the right way of describing it, of the planning officer dealing with the PreAPP. And I need to have discussions that I don't have time to do inside a planning application. There are only a few circumstances where you can actually build and develop in the Greenbelt, and you need to lay that pattern in the mind of the council planning officer straight away. You need them to understand it, and you can have that conversation at PreAPP stage, because inside an application there is no time.
Right? I assume you're talking about
just
new
run
build. I assume you're talking about new build there, John, because with is it ZA you can do in the Greenbelt, and Class Q.
ZA you can do, and Q you can do in the Greenbelt.
Yeah,
and that's where you would do, if there's a PD right, you would deviate away from a PreAPP, and you would utilize the PreAPP right instead.
Yeah,
this is obviously for sites where there is no PD right.
I got you. Yeah,
there is no solution, alternative solution. You must go for a full planning permission, and therefore in the Greenbelt I'd always knock on the door of the planning officer and get set in motion that discussion of, right, what exemption are we going to use, how are we using it, and how is it relevant to this site?
Brilliant. Okay. And John, we've kind of touched it on a little bit of it already, but on average, how long is it kind of taking to get determinations from the local councils on these applications? And also, are you finding there's a certain time frame when it comes to the whole appeal process as well?
Okay, so appeals are a bit more predictable than planning applications. Appeals generically at the moment are taking 6 months, no matter what grade of appeal you've submitted. Doesn't matter what appeal you submitted either. It's a 6-month turn and burn. That's how it is. And you have to treat appeals like that. You have to treat them like, I often use the term, they're a torpedo. So you fire a torpedo,
yeah,
and you've crossed your fingers and you cross your toes and you hope it finds its target, and good it does or it doesn't, right? But once you've fired that torpedo, you can't call it back. And that's the nature of appeals. If you do an appeal, make sure you're in it for the 6 months and you're willing to ride it through. Once on planning applications, this is a lot more unpredictable, especially now. There's been massive underinvestment in town planning across the UK. The government knows that and recognises that. There is a national shortage of town planners as well. And that's been the case for years. We used to import them from Australia because the Australian system is a carbon copy of the British system. Right, exactly the same. So Australian town planners can move straight into the British system. They know what they're doing.
Never knew that.
And vice versa, we can go out there and we can just get on with it. We know what we're doing, right? But the reality is, post-Brexit, we haven't been able to draw on that level of resource.
Yeah.
COVID, all of those resource chains have shut down. So reality is there's a national shortage, massive underinvestment, and that means that on average, we advise planning applicants to expect double the normal timescale for planning applications. So if the normal timescale is 13 weeks, expect 26. If the normal timescale is 8 weeks, expect 16. So that is in old money, either 4 months or 6 months to get a planning application through most councils. There are some councils doing rather well, but they tend to not negotiate with you. So there are councils out there that will literally just look at the application and then send out a decision. And they're horrible to deal with because that's where there's no conversation.
On the subject of planning consultants, I did see a post go out, is it yesterday or today, that you guys are looking for a planning assistant. So if anyone's watching this video, feel free to reach out to John's team if you've got the feel you've got the necessary knowledge and experience.
Yeah, we are looking. We're trying to grow as we always do, and we were told very recently that our existing planning apprentice has found himself a wonderful new role at a local authority down here. Fantastic. In the enforcement team.
Oh my God.
Which is hilarious. So he will probably be the most qualified enforcement officer in that county. But at least we've helped influence and grow his career from the start, which is wonderful. But what that means is that, yes, we are in the hunt, and we're in the hunt with everyone else. We know that we're not going to get someone qualified, so we are looking for someone pre-qualification that we can help develop, just like we've helped our existing apprentices.
Superb. John, what can we do to maybe stop or reduce our chances of our neighbours objecting to our application? And I'm just curious to know, are they then in a position to appeal that decision then? So can you just maybe paint us a little picture how that works?
Okay. So third-party right of appeal, let's deal with that first, doesn't exist in England. Neighbours don't have a right to go to the inspector and say, "Oi, we disagree with this decision." In Scotland, it does exist, and it exists in very limited circumstances. Otherwise, every planning application that people disagree with could just go to the inspector.
Yeah.
Up there, they're called the recorders, I believe.
Okay.
But in reality, there is no third-party right of appeal. What there is the ability to judicially review a planning decision, which must be done in the first 28 days. Now, in reality, a JR costs a lot of money, and most neighbours will be ill-equipped to deal with a JR. That is, unless you live in Virginia Water, where a judicial review is the difference between them buying a BMW this year or not. Right?
Yeah.
And you notice I said this year, because next year's BMW is always in the bag.
Yeah.
Right? In terms of objections, however, there are things developers can do, and there is guidance, both given by the Planning Advisory Service, PASS, and the RTPI, and government itself, on how to negate or mitigate or otherwise dispel some objections that you might receive. And it all comes from the idea of community involvement. Now, normally, developers run shy of the community. They don't like the community. The community are nasty and horrible people. But if you engage with the community at an early stage, what you'll do is you'll take some of the jar out, the knee-jerk out of the planning application. What do I mean by that? Put yourself in the position of you're a neighbour next to your development site in Elmbridge, right? And you will get through the door at some point in the future a letter from the council, and that letter from the council will say, Mr. Hartnett has put in a planning application for a building next door, and this building is going to be 3.5 stories high. Let's put a figure on it. And this building is going to be right next door to you. Oh, and there's going to be car parking at the back and windows and everything, and 9 families living there. Now, you get that through the door and you don't know anything about it. What you get as a neighbour is shock, because suddenly your world's about to end. As far as you're concerned, your world is about to end. You're most likely to then write to the council with an incredibly long, incredibly verbose, incredibly emotional objection, right? That's got a lot of knee-jerk reaction in them. Very much a not in my backyard principle. You won't have looked at the papers. You won't have looked at the application or understood it. You'll have just gone, oh, need to respond to this now, immediately. Write something, submit, gone. Right? You get the idea. Developers in Wales, let's go to Wales for example, on majors, are required to do community consultation. And that requirement was brought in as part of the Welsh planning for all the reforms in order to dispel some of the knee-jerk reaction and try and get developers to engage with neighbours at an early stage. Right? Because you have to report when you do the consultation what answers you got and how you've dealt with it when you then make the application. So what I would encourage developers to do is adopt the same principle. Now, you don't have to go and hire a hall and do all of this amazing nurse that Barrett's or Taylor Wimpey or any of the big boys do. No, you don't have to do that. Just go and speak to your neighbours. Knock on the door. Introduce yourself. Ask to have a cup of tea with them. Explain what you're trying to do. What you'll do is take the knee-jerk out of it. You'll take that instant reaction out of it. And the answer you'll get from a neighbour might very well be, actually, this is all right. Or it might be, I'm not too sure of this. Could you do X, Y, or Z? And that would be better for me. I'm not likely to object if you do X, Y, or Z. That X, Y, or Z might be as simple as, and I've had this, rendering the wall facing them white or cream so it reflects sunlight so that their garden becomes a bit of a sun trap.
Yeah.
You're benefiting them just by choosing the palette of materials, right?
Yeah.
And it takes some of the bulkiness, the massiveness out of the building, because a white render is much less bulky visually than a brown brick or a darker render. Simple. Yeah. So that kind of engagement really works. And if you engage in local councillors as well, I know we're talking politicians now, and it's probably not the right time of year, especially with what happened yesterday, for us to be talking about politicians. But if you engage with the local councillors and get them on side, then actually you're getting political weight behind your decisions. And that is really quite powerful.
perfect example of all this is one that we're working on right now, where we did the pre-app last year. Yourself and Alia are currently working on the submission of the full planning application right now. Before that goes in, we need to engage with the local residents, invite them to a gathering in the hall, and we'll have some CGIs, we're going to have some 3D models, and we're going to have some floor plans, and they can engage and meet the team, the professional team as well, you know, find out what's going on, so it doesn't ruffle too many feathers when it is submitted. And I will say something, John, you know, you've given me a huge amount of advice and I over the years, and so many golden nuggets, but one nugget which you've given me, which we're actually going to apply with this application, which you just mentioned, was where you've got a tricky application where you know there's like a colorful planning history on it already. You know you need to engage with the pre-app and, you know, sever that mindset that the LPA has associated with that site. When you know all this and you're going to be submitting your planning application, reach out to those local ward councillors. And, you know, you told me that, and you know, I wrote to 3 councillors, which I know have a huge weight, because one tip here is go onto YouTube, identify your council, type in planning committee, find out who the key players are. I did that. You know, we had identified 3 councillors. I wrote to all 3, and we've got full support, full backing now. When John submits that planning application in 4 weeks' time, they specifically even said, kindly attach our names and CC us in when you're submitting, because we're really keen to track this forward. We know it's a building and that's been run down and vacant, derelict for many, many years. We'd love to see someone like you to come along and redevelop it. So it was putting it all together, wasn't it, John? With you know, the residents, the councillors, and getting them all to, you know, to buy into this scheme.
Absolutely. I can only recommend more developers do it. I know developers are intrinsically scared of their local community because they see their local community as people who are there to stop them. They're not. They can be enablers as well.
Yeah.
And then your example of councillors is a classic one where the site may very well have been on the councillor's radar for some time. They may very well fervently disagree with the way the planning authority has been behaving in respect of the site for some time. They might also have said to their neighbours, this derelict site, we will sort it out, we will get it developed, right? They might have even said that. Now, if you latch into that, if you bridge the gap between the political process of planning and the practical process of planning, right? And you allow the political to engage at an earlier stage, then actually you're creating for yourself a important ally inside of the planning authority, because ultimately those councillors have one right that you will never get as a developer, which is they can toddle down to the civic offices, they can knock on the door of the chief planner at the council, and they can say, I want to have a chat. I want to have a chat about this site. And they will go and invite themselves into their offices, because ultimately they are the council's officers' paymasters. They're the ones that give the political weight behind what's doing. And who votes for your councillors? You all do.
Yeah.
We do. Every single year.
Yeah. It was interesting, John, because one of them reached out to me and she said, we actually walk past, or I actually walk past this building nearly on a daily basis, and I've been crying out for someone to develop it. So, you know, when you've got that, you know, when you've got someone like that supporting this application, you know, I find it very hard to believe you're not going to be successful.
It's one of those things, and that's the importance of utilising all of the tools you have available during any particular planning application cycle.
Yeah. John, it's been thoroughly enjoyable speaking with you. I do have a bit of a theme with all these videos, which is I'd like to ask all my speakers and my guests, have you got like an interesting story, good or bad or ugly, when it comes to what you've seen while you've been in this field? Tell us something.
Okay. So every once in a while, I will go to planning committee.
Yeah.
Now, when I was much younger in my consultancy career, I went to planning committee with a gentleman developer down here in Portsmouth. Now, we had 4 applications on the same committee to convert a small HMO, a 6-bedroom HMO, into a large HMO. Right? 4 of them.
Yeah.
All at the same committee, all following each other.
I got you.
And we went up and sat at the committee bench and did our piece. Now, unbeknownst to me, my client had decided that he wanted to go off piste, as it were, with what he wanted to say. And he had heard the head of service say something, and he was going to regurgitate it.
Ooh,
and what he said was, "You've heard from my planning consultant members, and of course, you've heard from your head of service. Once you give me planning permission for my large HMOs, I can put as many people as I want in them."
Ooh.
At that point, he lost the committee. Now, I was sitting next to him, stone-faced, thinking, if I react to this, I'm going to look like an idiot. My client is now officially an idiot. He's lost the committee completely. And lo and behold, the first application was refused unanimously, as was the second, as was the third. When it got to the 4th, right, I turned to the head of service in the chair, because I'd then spoken on 3 cases that had all been overturned. They'd all been recommended to approve. He was there, he was done. He just needed to be quiet.
Yeah.
Right? By the time we got to the 4th, I actually said to the chair, I could reiterate the merits of the scheme, but I think we all know where the committee's mind is in respect of this decision. So I ask only that once the committee makes its decision in short order, which I anticipate to be the same as the previous 3, that the head of service undertakes to release the decision notice as quickly as possible so we can challenge the matters at appeal. Now, we won all 4 appeals. We won an award of costs on 3 of them. Annoyingly, we had a different inspector on the 4th.
Really?
The moral of the story that I ask all applicants to follow now is keep to the script. Don't try and go off piste in a committee, and certainly don't ever threaten a committee with anything, because the moment you threaten a committee with anything is the moment you have lost them in entirety. So yeah, that's the moral of the story.
Jon, brilliant story, and I think wise words. If you take a planning consultant committee, stay dumb, don't say anything, and just let the professionals deal with the professionals. Wise words. Jon, thank you so much. So Jon, finally, who are you looking to connect with, and how can people get in contact with you?
So we love to connect with property developers, property entrepreneurs, people seeking to make a planning application. There are many different ways of engaging with us, but it all starts in one place, something we call triage. This was something we brought forward last year, and we've done a full year of it now. It's been fantastic. In order to bridge the gap between where you need the quick answer from a planning consultant and where you need something more formal. It allows any developer to book a half-an-hour slot with me. They're always on a Friday, so that we can go through the particulars of your application site. And essentially, it allows us as consultants to set up the thinking behind a site correctly, so that even if you don't use us for the planning application, you can take that advice away, which is given, and you can apply that through your architect and seek to get a planning permission in the right way. It all flows from the same place, which is our website, tpexpert.org. If you go to high quality advice, it gives a list of all of the jobs that we do, all the services that we offer. And we hope that helps people make the most of planning, getting the planning system to work for them.
I can definitely recommend your website. It's full of valuable content. You've got lots of PDFs and reports, and actually you've uploaded quite a few interesting appeals, haven't you, for people to reference?
Yeah, we have a section that we call Planningology. It's completely free. We have no tracking cookies on our website. We don't believe in them. So you can go to Planningology, you won't be tracked. You can go and look at all of the articles that are in there. There's full guides on what the different use classes are, what the different PD rights are, when you can use them, how you use them. And then there's a whole section on notable appeals. So if you're looking for a bit of appeal guidance on, development in Greenbelt or PD or the 56-day rule or whatever, there's probably appeal in there. And we're adding to it all the time as new exciting stuff comes up. We've recently had an appeal decision brought to our attention, which defines when an HMO use first starts. When does an HMO use commence, right? Brilliant. We needed an appeal decision to answer that question. That's gone straight into Planningology.
I'm actually quite excited just when you start to put up the appeals that we're going to see with all the new PD airspace rules. I don't think we've seen too many of them yet, have we?
There's not been too many of them, no. And yes, as soon as one is we're made aware of one, we tend to grab at that, put it up there. It's not just our own work; it's the work of countless other town planners up and down the country. It's all public information accessible via the inspectorate website. However, we like to share these important points in planning applications, important points in law, because they help inform the planning discussion going forward.
Brilliant. Jon, insightful, and hopefully everyone got some tremendous value there. You've got Jon's details. I'll make sure that TPX and all the contact details are actually below this video. Thank you so much for tuning in. Jon, thank you so much for so much valuable content there. And yeah, look forward to seeing everyone on the next video. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.